So Kaitlyn, I know AI is just a huge talking point really kind of across the world right now. And it feels like everything you hear is that AI is going to revolutionize the world, transform the way we think and the way we do business, and it'll change the landscape of jobs in the future. And so I think one of the questions that we get a lot from our clients is, as a marketer, like, how does this apply to me? Does it apply to me? What are the implications? And even though this is something that's a big talking point kind of emerging right now, it feels like this has actually been at the core of what we do at Keen for a long time. So yeah, I'm just curious, like, as the person that's leading a lot of the modeling efforts at Keen, what is your take on, AI and what we do?
Yeah, it's a great question. As you said, very hot topic, but it's been around here for quite a while. So why do humans in general go to ChatGPT these days? What is the interest? What is the appeal of it? It's really just because ChatGPT has access to the entire internet, way beyond what one single person can hold, even just hold in their mind at any state in their of their awareness. So essentially, going to ChatGPT opens up this entire universe of information that one human couldn't possibly comprehend, much less comb through and have all of the knowledge at their fingertips. Rather, why not just ask a simple question and ChatGPT does all that combing and research for you and spits out a single answer to address your question. That's exactly what our elasticity engine does here at Keen. It has access to infinite amounts of data points, way beyond what one single marketer can even comprehend. And it can go through and comb all of that information within a couple of minutes when you ask it a direct question, rather than you having to go through and find the answer for yourself. It'll just spit it out for you. Just like, again, also with ChatGPT, sometimes there's a little bit of context or a little bit of massaging, there's a human element that needs to be put on top of the answer, because it's going to give you a purely scientific, mathematical, just like, here's the answer. As humans, we have to go a little bit on top of it and say, okay, while that is correct, there's some additional context that I need to add into the picture here. I'll often say, you've heard me say this a million times, modeling is the combination of art and science. So essentially the elasticity engine, the AI component of what we do, that is the science. On top of that, there is always that human element, and that's where the marketer can come in, look at the scientific answer and put that context, put that description on top of it to really make the cohesive story of what a marketer is trying to tell and knows about their business.
Yeah, it's funny as you talk, I think it's reminding me of like the really big buzzword from probably 10 years ago when I was coming out of school, and that was big data. Like, everyone was talking about big data and using that data and processing it and storing it. And part of what I think we find with clients a lot is that they're used to that paradigm of, I have a lot of data at hand, but you hit on the word, like, it's the answer that is revealed by that data that's taking it one step further. So we joke around in this industry about like analysis paralysis. Like, you have so much information at hand that you can go down any number of rabbit holes and sort of try and disentangle what things mean from one another. But ultimately, it's about actually using that data to come to a pretty succinct and simple answer. And that's part of what our algorithm is doing, is taking all of that. Yes, it's centralizing it, it's processing it, it's helping to bring it together, which was something that was really revolutionary 10 years ago. But it's now that next step of, okay, I have all the data, so what does it mean? Like, a historical point in time ROI analysis doesn't actually tell you what you should do with your budget next year, doesn't tell the marketer what to do if their budget gets cut or if it gets expanded or if a new competitor comes along. Like, that framework of actually having to take action based on a lot of information, that is a lot of the scarier part, I think, of actually making some of these decisions as a marketer. And that's the bridge that I think our tool really is helping them cross.
I love that point. And to even take that another step further is, oftentimes we as humans, once we get that answer, we're like, great, that's the answer. I know this now. This is going to address another thing that we commonly see in our industry, which is something either recency bias or just an inherent ingrained answer. There are a lot of marketers will attack a problem the same way throughout their entire lifetime in this industry and within their business. But the reality is the answer can sometimes change. And we as
Yeah.
humans, like, we're not going to know that that answer changed off the bat of like, hey, maybe traditional marketing was the way to go, 5 years ago. Now it's a lot more digital leaning. While that's a pretty obvious example, in general, that's something our algorithm can also help take that to the next level. As that answer evolves with additional data that we're seeing across industry, across many different clients, we can help bring that answer, the changing of that answer, to light, even though you as a
Yeah.
human may not know within your little ecosystem, your little world. So it can help show that that answer can evolve over time with data backing it. So it's not just a set it and forget it, like, hey, it's just what I've always known to be true will always continue to be true. It really evolves over time as society. I mean, the greatest example in front of all of us is the COVID pandemic. Marketing these days is nothing like marketing was pre-COVID. So a lot of what we're
Yeah.
seeing, a lot of our clients now, is the data from pre-2020 really isn't being utilized very much in any of our models or any of our elasticities, because it's not the data that we have today. It's not telling the stories that we know to be true today.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the COVID, like the pre-COVID time period, because what I was thinking about when you were talking was the like inside of COVID time, where Instacart, as an example, was like off the charts, super profitable for a lot of our customers. But that changed because a lot of people tested out Instacart during COVID. They weren't going to the grocery store. They were doing some discovery on the platform. And that was a really hot moment for that platform. But that has kind of, come back down, and it doesn't mean that it's not a good part of the mix, but it doesn't have the same role that it did in April 2020. And so that is such a the world has changed a lot faster. It will continue to evolve. There are new platforms coming out all the time. Behaviors are shifting, and I think part of what is baked into that is this natural tendency that people have that maybe data doesn't have as much, which is just having the pendulum swing too far in one direction. A lot of our customers, they moved away from print advertising. Let's say newspapers and magazines were not really part of their mix because it became all digital. But what our algorithm kind of pushes a lot of those marketers to do is reconsider, like, should you have actually thrown that tactic out wholesale, or maybe have you gone a little too far in one direction? Because it is the cool new thing to be on digital, but there's more to it. Some of those tried and true, like traditional tactics, are there for a reason and should actually remain part of your mix.
Yeah, I love that. And why as a single marketer, a single human, why burden yourself with trying to keep track of all of that information out there when you've got an automatic tool that can go find that information for you within the confines that you put it, just like a request to any of the AI bots that are out there now. Currently, ChatGPT just being one of them. Why would you just rely on your own ability to identify those trends when you've got all of that data at your fingertips and a tool and a system and an algorithm to go find that information for you?
Yeah, one of the other parts that I think I've watched kind of as an interesting evolution in the industry is that, so my background is in digital marketing. I think automation took hold there with bidding and with targeting, and Google was really on the forefront of like helping to automate some of the processes that are sort of down the funnel of decisions. But it has remained really elusive what you do and how you think about automation up the funnel, because how do you go about comparing a TV commercial to a coupon to a TikTok spot? And so it has been kind of a it's kind of taken hold in some of those lower level things that are more understandable. So if I'm managing, a Google Ads campaign and I turn on automated bidding, I can see pretty clearly whether or not that increased my CPC or my conversions or whatever it might be. But it's way, way harder to know, is my like automated tool that's telling me to invest, more in TV and less in, whatever else, is that right? And so that's a big part of the like core of our algorithm, is that it takes data from your company directly, and it looks at your sales performance. It decomposes that into its parts, but it's also looking at that for millions and millions of other companies and other data points, because that's how you can start to bring together the forest instead of always looking at the trees. Otherwise, like, how could you possibly think about doing that with just your little world of sort of situational data?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Completely agree.
Awesome. So I think another part that I'm interested in, as you've helped clients really build their model, is, you know, how you approach kind of giving them a framework for thinking about unknowns, because we're talking a lot about data, but also I think from having worked with, you know, many of our customers' kind of core questions, it's more about how do I approach things that are ambiguous? So it's not just collecting the data and making a good decision off of that perfect information. It's like, how do I use modeling and AI to kind of walk me down that path of this open-ended question of, is there something else I should be capturing or something I don't see coming? Like, how do you think about that from the modeling side?
Yeah, I love it. It's a great question. Essentially, what we do is we're very transparent here at Keen within our entire modeling process. So when you build a first model with support from someone on my team, we will go ahead and show you, hey, this is what that model is looking like. We have a lot of graphics within the tool that really show when there is some kind of uncertainty or is something unknown that the model is not fully aware of. It will tell you, and it'll be very clearly stated, like, hey, there's something else going on here that the model doesn't know based on the ecosystem and the environment that you've given it. That's where our team can come in and help translate, saying, hey, what happened on this week? It looks like there's a reoccurring spike every single year. What context do you and your brand have as to what might be causing that? So that's something where it's, if we know we can find out what it is, that's something that our model can evolve to essentially help account for anything that it deems as important enough to help tell that cohesive story. However, if it actually is an uncertainty and actually is ambiguous of, hey, we don't know what's caused this residual spike in sales, we're not sure what's going on here. In general, we always recommend leaving it as that unknown, because that allows our forecasting and our predicting in our plans part of our application to really be a lot more accurate rather than labeling an unknown as an unknown, because then that way you're pigeonholing it in, you're making the algorithm say, oh, we know something happened here, we just don't know what. Why label something if you have no idea what's caused it and you don't know if it's going to reoccur or is something that's going to be a part of your environment in the future as well?
Yeah, I like that a lot, because I think we sometimes get the perspective of, oh, we need to have a really high R square. We need to really understand exactly what drove every single impact here. And I think our models generally do have a really high R square, but there's always, by design, there should be some degree of wiggle room, because you want your data to be able to evolve and do what we were just talking about, which is not just try to overfit the past based on what used to be true. It's about like leaving that little bit of wiggle room for the future and what's coming.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that balance of like fit of historical data and then open-ended, what's going to happen in the future, like something that started to take hold that we didn't really have a name for, let that become bigger so that we can actually identify it and see how it's changing, your investment recommendations going forward. I think it's a little ambiguous, which makes it a little scary, but that's why a tool like this exists, is to not force you into just repeating the same behaviors over and over and not evolving for the better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the powers of our tool and our algorithm and our application, as compared to some of the more traditional AI chat bots that exist these days, is really understanding what that limitation and what that gap in knowledge is. For example, there was a while when ChatGPT was stuck in this concept of it wasn't pulling any information from the data from the internet after this date. And that was like a known limitation, but the chatbot wouldn't offer, hey, by the way, my data is slightly outdated. Like I may not have the full image of what the world looks like right now. It's actually 2 years ago is the world that I know. Our model will say that. Our model will explicitly state, hey, there's a gap here, and there is a gap in knowledge, and we're looking to you as the marketer or as the keen employees to really help provide that context on top of that gap. So it's never just going to pretend like it knows literally everything that has ever happened and ever will happen. There's always going to be a little bit of a gap. There's a little bit of an error, but that's expected and that's welcomed in the world of modeling, because that you've got to acknowledge nothing is omnipotent. No, what's the word?
Omnipresent.
Omnipotent. That's the word. Nothing. The algorithm is not omnipotent. I can't say that word.
Onomatopoeia.
Yeah. The model will never pretend that it knows everything, and that is part.
Yeah, it's not a crystal ball. It's I think exactly what you were just saying about the art and the science. Like you and I worked through a few examples pretty recently where we actually recommended that the client change the response variable of the model because we were finding that a dollar response variable was not giving us the clarity that we expected to see, and it was directly tied back to inflation. And so the actual meaning and integrity of a dollar was changing. And so it didn't matter if you had good dollar data. We as human beings knew what was going on, and we could help make the recommendation to switch to something like units, which is a bit more of an apples to apples comparison, given the inflationary environment. But we've both been at Keen for 4 years now, and that was the first time that was really a need that emerged, because inflation is a much bigger factor today than it was 3 years ago. And so that bit of art and science was such a clear example of our data actually signaled to us, like, I can't figure out what's going on here. There's really strange behaviors in this dollar estimation. And as the art coming over top of it, we were able to identify we actually do need to change the metric that's being used here. And we had such better clarity coming out of those reads, because all of a sudden now we were going to be using apples to apples data over time and not this weird nebulous dollar that had started to change in 2023.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just one examples of many of adding the human element on top of some kind of AI or something algorithm is critical to the long-term success of using any type of automated tool. Otherwise, that it is going to miss that context. It's going to miss that story of what you're really trying to understand and what you're really trying to tell. You can feed it as descriptive prompts as you want and say exactly what you're looking for the output to be, but there's always going to be some kind of misses based on that gap of awareness that it has, that you may or may not know what that gap is going to be. So that's where we always like to show that gap, so you are fully aware of the assumptions being made and can make the best decision based on the data that you have available.
So I guess to bring it kind of full circle to where we started the conversation, if you had to guess how AI will change a marketer's role in the next 5 years and maybe beyond that, what are your guesses?
That's a great question. I think my first guess is a challenging of considering things that you've never considered before. So being able to suggest, like, hey, you've been always a very heavily digital marketer, like focusing heavy on digital. Have you considered throwing in a dash of radio to help compensate for that digital? Or suggesting things that you as an individual marketer would never have thought to do based on what the rest of the world is doing. So I think that's one of the biggest evolutions we'll see in how AI can really impact the day-to-day life of a marketer. And probably not even 5 years. We're probably talking a couple years at most here.
Yeah.
Same question back at you. How do you think AI will continue to evolve the day-to-day life of a marketer in the coming couple years?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a continuation of the trend that I first observed in digital marketing, which is some of the activities that you used to spend a lot of time on are going to be handed over to automation. So bidding and targeting, that's already very much in the hands of AI. I think the approach of marketing mix feels really heavy and challenging today, and that's not untrue, but I think AI is going to make that much more automated in the future. And that's part of what our tool does today, is it kind of spits out a plan that theoretically you could act upon exactly as it is, and there's always going to be that human element over top, but it is a big transition that people haven't fully made yet to like really trust that plan and kind of move forward with it. But I think over the next few years, we are going to get to more of that state where the actual mix is optimized by more of an automated solution.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that the humans are not still part of it. It just means that they can kind of move their focus up another level.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the conversations I find myself having are around what are the cross-functional inputs to this plan that you need to go collect that marketers are frankly blind to in a lot of cases because it's not part of their day-to-day. They have so many things to do in that planning section of the world that they don't have time to consistently work with their demand planning colleagues or their finance counterparts to understand how the plan comes together across the org. And I think that companies have started to recognize like we need this omni-channel approach. We've seen sort of this evolution toward like revenue growth management teams, like these really cross-functional teams that start to bring the perspectives together. But that's hard to do. I think any company, one of the biggest challenges is bringing the like siloed kind of perspectives together. So I hope and I think that moving some of the mix part of the consideration into an automated state will let marketers really sit at the table effectively with their counterparts in other parts of the organization and have those conversations, because some of our really cutting edge clients are doing that today, but generally speaking, that's a big additional leap that's not happening consistently, and I think that's where the real unlock is going to happen.
Yeah, completely agree. Cannot wait to move forward into that world. And we at Keen are here and ready to help facilitate those conversations.